The most interesting game of round 7 of Norway Chess was Veselin Topalov against Fabiano Caruana. Not that this game promised too much. Topalov played a very solid g3 fianchetto and Caruana responded in kind, and well, you can see the pawn structure is almost completely symmetrical, and when Caruana played queen c6 I was expecting Topalov just to exchange queens, and that would suit him very well as he's 1.5 points clear in the lead in the tournament. But instead of exchanging queens, well, he surprised me. I was commentating live in this position by dropping his queen back to a1. Looks very odd. Well, the idea is that he's trying to push through with e4, and you can see the queen is on the same diagonal as the king, and there could be some interesting tactics after e4 and d5. But, well, it doesn't look too serious, and Caruana just nudged out of the way with his queen so that if e4 comes, then he can just take this and play e5, and no problem there at all. Topalov continued with his tricks. Bishop h3, threatening bishop e6 and a knight fork. But now Caruana went on the offensive with queen c2, good move, so he's avoided any tricks here. And the queen is starting to look a little bit menacing. Of course, the queen also prevents e4, that can just be taken. But Topalov wasn't finished with his attacking ideas. First of all, he played a4 and brought the queen to a3. So that queen prevents the knight going to d6 or e7. But also sometimes the queen might be able to invade. And he's still perhaps angling for some kind of sacrifice on e6, maybe. But now it's Caruana's turn, because of course the queen has left the back rank, and so he can start to attack White's king. Although it has to be said, with the knight back on c8, it's difficult to get too much in this position, but Black can try. If the king goes to g2, then of course there's a check on f1 supported by the bishop. So king h2 and now queen d2. And if the king goes back, then queen e1 followed by queen takes f2 is nasty. And if the king goes to g2, then yeah, queen e1 again, and the threat to queen f1 is unpleasant. But Topalov, well, he played very creatively here. He played bishop g2. This was his clever idea. And the point is that if queen takes f2, then the queen drops back to c1, guarding e3 and threatening to invade on c7. And just for a moment, Black finds it very difficult to defend. It's as though Topalov has lured this queen forward and suddenly it can't get back. Now, Black is probably okay here, but it's a little bit tricky, and the combination of queen and knight attacking Black's king is not to be underestimated. That there's potential knight e6, maybe you can use the h-pawn, maybe the queen bounces back. In any case, Caruana decided not to go in for that. I think that was probably a good decision. Instead he played h6. Tricky move. So for the moment White can't do very much. That queen can't invade because the knight covers those squares. And maybe he wants to drive that knight out of the way and then perhaps take on f2 or use his bishop. But Toppy played very creatively again. He pushed with a5. Now if this is taken, then queen c5, and again White's queen is invading. So Caruana took this. Queen takes a5, and now the queen bounced back to c1. So Topalov has managed to find a way in to Black's position by giving up this pawn. And now there's no longer any threats to his king. So Caruana needs to bring this queen back. So he played queen b4. So that means he can defend from either d6 or e7 if the queen invades. So Topalov needed to throw more fuel on the fire, so he played e4. Excellent move. So Topi is really going for it, and you can sense in this tournament that he's playing with great freedom. Now, queen takes d4 was played by Caruana. It is possible to take on e4, and well, both players were analysing this position. But then d5, so things are starting to open up, and if that's taken, then this queen, I tell you, that is the hardest working queen in Norway Chess at the moment. Fantastic piece, it's switching back and forth. Black is still okay in this position after e5, but if queen a1 again, it's a little bit tricky, hitting the e5 pawn and the bishop. Black can survive here with queen d4. I mean, it gets very complicated. White can choose between knight e6 and queen takes a6, and white is probably okay here because the king is a little bit exposed. Or queen takes a6 is also possible. And as I said, both players had actually analysed this, and now black has a saving move, well, more than saving, yeah, f3. But white is probably okay here after king g1. It's complicated. In any case, Caruana played a simpler move, queen d4, and that's a practical move as well. He was slightly short of time. Topalov wasn't. Topalov had more time. But Caruana is short of time. When you're short of time, you play a practical move. You bring your queen into the centre so that you can defend your king, and it covers the long diagonal. Good move. E takes d5. So Topi is still going for it. Now, if black recaptures on d5, then, well, one could play maybe queen c7, but perhaps first it's best to play h5 to open up black's king. And this is very tricky, although white is still a pawn. Yeah, he's a pawn down here. You can see that black's king is opening up. Black has to be very careful on this long diagonal. Yeah, careful of tricks like this, for example. Here and now. Check, and that bishop is still loose. But also that knight might bounce around into f5, and don't forget the queen coming in c7. Short of time, this would be a very unpleasant position to play, but Caruana had never intended that. He played e5, and now it seems as though black is taking control. Of course, if the knight retreats, then black is absolutely fine there. This knight perhaps comes into play, or maybe queen c5. I mean, going back to h3 would just be too passive, would be disastrous. But Topi had seen all this. Knight e6 check, giving up a piece, and this exposes black's king, and now it's actually, with best play, just a draw by perpetual check. So this is how the game went. Now, not knight e7, that would be a mistake. Allowing queen f8. Embarrassing. The queen had to, the king had to come back. And now this is the best move. Queen d7. Taking on e6 doesn't actually help. Black is fine there. Queen d7 check, however, was played. Now, if knight e7, then d6 wins. That's unfortunate. So black can never use this knight for defence. This is a problem. So the king came back, and now they repeated check, and so on. There's nothing better for both sides. So, well, Topalov tried very hard in a position that seemed barren, but Caruana was up for the task and defended very well. After the game, Topalov said, "I'm quite philosophical recently. I'm not nervous." But he also admitted that he was probably very optimistic with his play in that last part of the game. He pushed it a bit, almost came unstuck. All games in round 7 were drawn, a couple of them very quickly, wasn't the most interesting round, but we can't be treated in every single round. The players have played very enterprising chess so far. So that means that Topalov is still in the lead with 6 out of 7, and he is 1.5 points ahead of Nakamura and Anand with 2 rounds to go.